Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm glad everyone could be here. Whether this is your first time coming to a webinar like this, or you've been part of our three-part series, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I think you'll find benefit whether you've been with us all along or you're just joining for the first time today. The webinar we are presenting today is Learning to Succeed or Pathways to Purpose. We will be hosted by Dee Masaiello, the founding director of the Center for Continuing and Professional Education, and she will be taking us through a series of slides. It's going to be an interactive presentation today, so we encourage everyone to chat in their thoughts, use the polls that come up, send us any feedback that you'd like to share. It makes it a much more fun and exciting session. And without further ado, I will turn it right over to Dee.
Thank you, Allison. And again, thank you everyone for attending and joining us today. Very much looking forward to sharing this culminating component of the three-part webinar. But as Allison indicated, we will definitely touch upon some of the main concepts covered in the two earlier webinars. And of course, those are available as recordings for anyone who would like to go back and watch them if they were unable to attend. So the webinar today is about aligning education with vision and goals. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. It is part of that concept of thinking about, really sitting down and focusing and thinking about what you want to do, what is passionate, what brings you passion, what your goals are, and then trying to figure out the appropriate approach to obtaining education, training, learning. I think we all know the world has changed considerably and things move at absolute, speed of light, so to speak, thanks to technology, and that we're constantly having to update what we know, not even just from an educational perspective, but just the way we address the world around us. And that's also true in our careers. And so really thinking about what those educational pathways are is something I think a lot of people have to reframe from maybe what you're used to thinking about, maybe how you're used to thinking about what it means to quote unquote get an education. So again, we'll talk about that over the course of the presentation, and we'll be able to communicate and exchange thoughts. So, okay, Allison, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So again, the aim here is to provide you with tools to really align your learning path with your deepest ambitions and life's objectives. And it sounds like a lot to accomplish in an hour, and it is. What I intend to do here is just give you the thoughts and tools and processes and suggestions for really thinking about what it means to bring those things together, and then how to position that knowledge to help you obtain it. Can I have the next slide, please? So in the chat, please, if you wouldn't mind, and again, the more interactive this is, the better. In the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing in one word your response to the question, what do you aspire to achieve with your education? Growth, knowledge. Don't be shy. Jane? Growth, confidence, that I did it feeling, absolutely. Empowerment, vision, you want to serve. I mean, these are all extraordinarily, wisdom. Oh gosh, wisdom. That's such, there's the big difference between, right, being educated and having wisdom, but they do connect, right? Well, this is excellent, and these are the things that we see education as our pathway to ultimately bettering ourselves. And in bettering ourselves and in creating better potential for ourselves, we can then affect the world and those around us, in a much better way, in a much more impactful way. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. All right, next slide, please. So to give you a recap of what we covered in the previous two presentations, we talked about setting mission, visions, and goals. We defined what they were. So, vision is our desired future. It's what we see when we think about it. Thinking about it, it's sort of our dream, if you will, our aspirations. Mission is the path that we take to get there, right? Because we all know vision is a wonderful thing, but if there's no formal path, right, what drives us, it's a lot more difficult. It tends to become overwhelming and feel as though it's entirely too much for us to deal with. So we want to understand what our desired future is, knowing that with wisdom and everything else, that can shift over time. But having these are built off of our values, which tend to, as they develop over time, they tend to enforce and become part of our personality. So our values don't shift all that much, but our vision for the future may, depending upon our life and life changes and what happens. But it's good to start somewhere, right? So you have that vision, you set your mission. Well, my mission is to attain that vision, and then you create the goals that create the milestones that enable us to, one, make those large, beautiful visions achievable, make them seem more realistic, get them out of our heads. And also, because we set milestones, we also recognize and allow ourselves to see how we're doing on the path to reaching those goals. And this is also what enables us to be a little bit more adaptable. Believe it or not, setting goals allows more adaptability in setting milestones, because you might reach a certain milestone and realize something is changing a little bit. Rather being so far down a path, it's so much more sort of overwhelming to think to turn around. You can say, no, I'm here. I can add value to what I've done, and this is how I'll shift. And of course, we also talked about things like ambition and motivation. What is ambition? Why do we have this drive to achieve and excel, and motivation to achieve and excel in some things, and in others, not so much, right? We talked motivation is ultimately something that is unique to individuals, but it is that drive. And it all depends upon things, the importance we put on things, and the focus that we put on things. It comes from intrinsic ability to just want to do something for the sake of doing it. And it comes extrinsically to want to really nail that presentation. So you get that so you impress your boss and you get that promotion, right? So these are really sort of setting the field for this idea of getting inside of our heads and figuring out what it is that drives us, what motivates us, and how we can make a plan to then achieve ultimately the longer term goals and reach that vision. Okay, Allison? So we're going to have a quick poll right now, as we've discussed these concepts, which of these concepts do you feel most ready to explore in relation to your education, right? So as we put education in the context of helping us get where we need to go, which of these do you see it most related to? Couple more minutes and we can show the results. I shouldn't say a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds. All right. Well, I think we can, Allison, or we can show the results right now. Okay. So, of those responding, about a third of you said you were really exploring your ambition with, looking to that motivation, ambition. 22 goals, 11% vision, and another 33% mission. And I think this is a really interesting breakdown. Often you'll be asked a question, where are you in your educational journey? No, I'm just looking. Or I know what I want and I'm ready to take the move. Or I'm not quite sure what I want, but I'd like to explore a little bit more. And those can really be defined by these approaches. Anyone who's sort of looking at education and their journey right now as their vision, it's exploring. It's great. It's like you have a wonderful you're sort of open to a lot of things, and you're creating that initial vision, and you're not sort of necessarily pigeonholed into any one thing. Those of you in mission and are sort of saying, okay, let's figure out how to get there. I know what I want. Let's figure out how to get there. Those of you with goals have already figured out what you want. Now you're trying to set those milestones for yourself, right? Trying to figure out. And then those of you in ambition can really be in any position of this right now. But what you're doing is you're just ready to go, right? You're ready to go, and you might be looking for a little guidance. You might not quite know. You might not, just really want to learn a little bit more. And that may be driven more by looking for a mentor or peer or someone to speak with than it is actually looking at a specific course or course of action. And that's great too, because we have those for you as well. All right, so let's go to the next slide, please. All right. Pop off. Let's get the whole thing in front of me. So aspirations, when you kind of are at a page when you're thinking, particularly those of you who kind of have some of those, maybe more in the mission stage or in the goal stage, but at any stage, when you have aspirations, right? Peeling those back and really understanding why, right? So someone, and we can go back to the words that you chose, that one word you chose, growth or knowledge or confidence or I did it feeling, or, to help others, right? These are things that peel back that motivate. If you think about them, those are the motivations that are driving you, right? And they can come from a variety of places, not just the desire to advance in your career or build skill. It is about who you are as a person, what you value, and the legacy that you want to create, right? Some people, I've been working in higher ed for a very long time, and I have been in more than one program where adult students have been really touched and really moved by the fact that they would be sitting there doing their homework with their junior high and high school kids and saying and having coming and telling me that their kids were so impressed, thinking, hey, mom and dad are sitting here doing their homework with me. This isn't something kids do, right? It's something, and that role model you're creating, that lifelong learning is important, and that discipline is important, and that's something that I think many of them would have never even thought about as a result of obtaining education, which again, kind of in their for their own perspective, these few, helping them be a better parent, right? Helping them show instead of, do not because I said so, but as we know, we can get really frustrated with kids, but hey, I'm doing it. I'm doing it right now and I'm modeling. So again, and that's a great legacy to leave to pass on to your children, right? That hard work pays off, and that, sacrifice sometimes isn't fun and it can be stressful, but in the long run, the long-term gains, I think that's something we all love to pass on to our kids. So if you really look at educational ambition, it's a compass guiding you, because there's so much to learn, particularly today. There's so much out there. There's so many ways to obtain it. There's so many ways to get the wrong information. But at the same time, we have never before been in a world where we're, as individuals who are really thirsty for knowledge and developing that vision and wanting to learn more and better, have more choices. And sometimes that can create some of the biggest challenges to moving forward because you don't know where to begin. So we'll talk about that here as well. Next slide, please. This brings us back a little bit, but this idea of passion and purpose. This is what wakes us up in the morning, excited about something. So it may seem, unfortunately, because often education is created has established itself in a social context that it's a chore and it's something we have to do. So it doesn't always, and we're not always really thrilled about what we have to learn, or we may not be able to connect with it at the time. But I say that from my personal experience when I was younger, thinking about things like finance and accounting, like it wasn't where I went, but understanding that over the long term, it would mean more to me. And especially returning to school, understanding that now you have this application that you can put it in. So when you think about passion and purpose, think about how acquiring that knowledge, while it may not be the most exciting thing in the world, how it is going to inform the broader knowledge of what you want to understand, right? Because education, we ladder, right? Education is something that we build upon. And the more we know, remember those, I don't know if any remember those commercials, the more you know, the more we know, the more we absorb, because we have a foundation with which to pull that information in and connect those neural pathways, right? So the more we know, the broader our impact, because the broader our perspective and the greater we're able to process what's coming in. And again, as an example, I am a huge fan of medieval British history, and I teach, and I'll say to my business school students, when I tell them and talk about a passion, when I say to my students, we'll be talking about, pestle analysis, Porter's five forces, and I'm promising you, I am going to interweave something about a 14th century British king in here, and you will learn more about that. And they kind of laugh, but I think to myself, at some point, and I've had students come back and say, actually, that came up and made me think of it. So again, layering, the more you know, the more you learn, which means not every single learning opportunity you have might seem directly related, or it might seem completely unrelated, but it never is. It always brings you back to, again, that broader perspective. And the more we know, the more passion we have. Okay, please, next slide. So again, I'm throwing some examples here. Consider the story of someone who's just their drive is a deep concern for environmental sustainability, right? They went after that, studied that, not necessarily because they wanted to be another expert in the field of sustainability, but because they could integrate that concept, that content, with other areas. Maybe they were a policy expert, or maybe they were a community activist, or maybe they were an English teacher, right? It didn't matter that an English teacher and maybe environmental science didn't seem to logically connect. The passion for the environmental science drove them there. And the foundation of what they learned and they knew already enabled them to find the right pathway to blend those skills and create purpose, follow a passion, and ultimately give them a career that they loved. So what you want to understand is there's always that connection, but it's about the more you know and making those connections and talking to people and reaching out to people and getting mentorship and all of those things. But education, no matter what you do, I don't care if it's basket weaving or, underwater sandwich making, it will always somehow create more of a sense of broad learning in you than you would have had if you hadn't taken it. So I think sometimes we approach things with like, oh, it doesn't really fit in with what I want to do. I could probably, and I'm happy to do this, I could probably argue, debate with you you told me what you wanted to do and the class you might be interested in taking, I could debate with you how it in fact would fit in with what you wanted to do. Okay, please, next slide. So again, this is one of those times, this is also the reflective approach, right? And I'm, anyone who's been to any of these previous webinars know that I am big on reflection, because if we don't stop and think and really, and this builds what's called a metacognitive ability in learning that we have, which is we become more aware of how we learn. We all learn differently, right? And that I'm not talking about audible learners and visual learners, because that's a preference. There's been studies done that say, there's questions whether or not that's actually about learning or just about the way you're engaging with material. And that's entirely up to you. But if you think if you saw a course that had much more visual engagement and you found that you connected with it much more, you might say to yourself, what was it about that course? What was it about that visual engagement? What was it about that experience that made me learn and that made me want to learn something more? And that, again, that goes back to that motivation. It goes back to the values. It goes back to that you already knew something about it and you were seeing that connection. You were, the aha moment went off in your head. So reflection is really big in learning. So if you want to think about a time, and you don't have to do anything, this is one of those areas where I'm giving you some prompts for reflection for yourself. Feel free to write these down. Again, the presentation will be available, but some of the things that you want to think about as you are considering, okay, I'm at the mission stage, or I'm at the goal stage of my educational journey, but I'm still sort of trying to figure it all out. Think about this experience and a time when you were deeply motivated to learn something new, right? So it could have been a subject in academics that presented a significant challenge. You had one of those moments where, that I think, Jane, going to you, that I did it feeling like, I'm not going to let this beat me. I'm going to figure this out. Okay. A skill that piqued your curiosity, learning a different language, or I don't know, learning how to juggle. And again, juggling may seem silly, but it's not. It's a new skill, and it requires a certain ability to learn, right? It's a physical, I don't know if anybody on this can juggle. I'm impressed by people who can juggle. Or perhaps knowledge you recognized as being pivotal for your own development or making meaningful impact on others. So remember, if we're at a stage where we, again, decide to seek some mentorship or some, psychological support because we're struggling with someone, that is being motivated to learn. It's being motivated to learn about ourselves and to make a change because we recognize that's important for our development. Or you just dad learned how to dance so he could dance with his daughter at her wedding, right? I mean, there's so many different reasons why we are motivated to learn, but I encourage you to think about a time when you were motivated and what it was that ignited your motivation. I gave some examples. So again, maybe learning something something unknown, right? The gratification of mastering something. That's one of the biggest goals of motivation is mastery. We want to be good at certain things. You saw something that helped you affect change. And how did this moment when you did this, when you, again, I did it, or I learned it, I figured it out, how did it resonate with you? And did it resonate with your broader educational and life goals? Sometimes we celebrate something, but we don't say, I learned that, yay, woohoo. But it's like, stop for a moment and say, well, I learned this. That means I can learn, it's going to help me here. It's going to help these people here. Or back to dad dancing with his daughter, like that just made me a better parent. So again, there's so many ways, but I think we often tend to look at these achievements as they stand alone. And I'm really encouraging you through reflection to think about, one, what is the experience that comes to mind? What motivated you? So what were those passions, what were the drivers? Were they positive? Were they sort of like, I guess again, the idea of doing it because it was something you wanted to do, or doing it was something because the result of learning it would benefit you and benefit others? How did you feel during the journey? Why is it we stick with some things, even when we get frustrated, and other things we don't, right? How did it contribute to your growth of the well-being of others? Have you even thought about that? I'm sure you probably thought how it contributed to the well-being of others. We tend to think of that, but how did it contribute to your own physical, mental, right, well-being? And then ultimately, can you see a way that it might reflect your broader educational aspirations or ambitions? Because particularly if you overcame hardships, if you struggled but still moved with it, if you something about it was really driving you, right? And that was a passion that you can't fake, right? Even if it was, oh, I'm going to do this if it kills me type of thing, it was still something that was important enough to you to finish. And how can, what can that tell you about where you might want to go educationally next, right? So strongly suggest you copy these questions, start thinking of them, revisit them, and know that reflection, really understanding what the process was and how it affected you and how you learned, is super important in helping you make future decisions. Next, please. So again, create a vision, right? I know we started with a vision, but this is your educational vision. So this is a little bit more detailed and aspirational, but it's thinking about outcomes and impacts you want to achieve through your educational endeavors. And sometimes it's just to be, personally fulfilled. But again, what you're notice is I'm sort of what I'm not saying here that you might hear when you go to see a career placement person or a career counselor is I'm not driving this to the point of how it will help you get a job. I'm not denying in any way, shape, or form that that's important, or how it will help you get promoted. That is absolutely right. If this is about your professional growth, that's absolutely what you do. But if it's only about getting a job and it's only about getting promoted, it's not a vision, right? It's sort of a one moment in time to do something. So how then do you leverage that so that it's helping you beyond that one moment in time, but also helping you build as a person? Because sometimes people are entirely too focused in on doing all the right things to get a job or a career. They change as people and as a process of that education. So by the time they get to where they're going, they realize I'm not even that person anymore, right? But I do, and often that will make them feel bad because it's like I put all this time and education into it and into this area. Now I don't even want to do it anymore. But the reality is, who is that new person? What were those skills? And how can you figure out to take that vision? And you might have to tweak it a little bit, right? It's like when you're cooking soup and you did it and you go take a spoonful and you go, you know what? Still could use some more salt. All you do is you tweak it a little bit. You add a little bit more salt. So, and that's what I mean by these sort of smaller components of adding blocks into your wall, if you will. So, but we all need that guiding star. So thinking about what we want to do. And do not share this, but I have I'm going to put this in the chat, which I'd like you to all be able to keep this. Am I not able to add something to the chat? I may not be able to.
Depends on what type of file it is.
It's a Word. It's a document.
That should be allowed. I can take a look at our settings
Oh,
here.
hold on. I don't know how to use my computer. Sorry. Hold on. Bear with me, folks. Yep, here we go. Okay. Why are you telling me the name? All right, I'm going to keep talking and I'm going to send this to my colleagues so that they can post it for you. But it is a toolkit that I would like to share with you because it's something as a document you can look back on and use as you develop out your career path. So just hold on with me for 1 second. Okay, perfect. All right, Allison, I sent that to you. So again, you will see this when you get through. Allison, can we pop to the next slide, please? Okay, so in one of the earlier webinars, we had people talk about putting together a personal vision statement. Again, this isn't something I want you to necessarily spend a lot of time doing now. And for those of you, if any of you were here for that vision statement, you would definitely see it. But this is kind of it's an inventory, if you will, of what you've accomplished thus far, what skills you think you've had, and where would you like to see yourself 5 years from now. So you want to put together, and again, you can jot these things down. You don't have to do anything formal at the moment. We also have I think the personal vision statement worksheet that we could probably email to all of you as well that appeared in the other webinar. But again, in 5 years from now, thinking about what skills have you mastered in 5 years from now, what professional achievements have you unlocked? And again, I say unlocked instead of sort of mastered or given, because this is the opportunity to be successful and make these achievements. And how are you contributing to your community or your field? I'd like you to be willing to be highly aspirational about this and not self-censor yourself, censor yourself, which we also have the tendency to do, censoring ourselves and thinking, no, that's not possible. Really, just give yourself the moment to think about these things, because they will, and they may be seem very disjointed and unrelated, but that's the goal. Is when you put that vision together, then you think about the mission, and then you think about how you get there, and what are the courses, what are the actions you can take in order to build those skills. Because sometimes skills are, you don't just take one course and master skills, right? You take one course with a certain skill focus, another course that might be a different topic, but helps same skill focus, and you can continue to build on those skills, right? So for instance, if you want to be a better public speaker, you don't just have to take a public speaking class. You can take classes that require you to communicate in a public forum, writing classes about voice and articulation, classes about building confidence. Like all of those things come back to, I'll be a better presenter if I do this. And I will have also expanded an understanding of how those skills can be used in other areas of my life. Okay. So when you get your vision together, right, as we talked, that's kind of like the large aspirational thing. Then the next thing you want to do is to consider defining a learning mission, right? So this is the map, as we talked about before, that guides you there. and the things that, and it approaches it embodies your approach to learning and development, influenced by personal values, ethical considerations, the impact you aim to have. So again, this isn't what classes are you going to take. This is really your learning mission and the types of things that are important to you as a human being that you touch upon, while also at the same time fitting in learning experiences and educational opportunities that help you address those unique missions while also building those skills, right? So what do you want to learn? And again, I go back to don't learn a profession so much as learn the skills to be successful, and the skills in the requirements of that job or that profession, but also the skills that enable you to see a wider context of how that profession is not just insulated. It has many, many, many different potential opportunities. And that's why we do skills here. That's my learning philosophy, is that everything, as I've said before, everything matters. Ultimately, it's just your ability to figure out how to put them all together. And then, it's, and again, a purposeful approach to education, but not necessarily a map of the courses or the programs that you need to take, because you're doing this skill thing in 5 years. What would you like to have mastered? You know what the world will look like in 5 years? There'll be at least one technology none of us have been thinking about today, right? That might change the way jobs are done, that might require a new skill, but also will require the ability to figure out critical thinking and maybe emotional intelligence. If we're working in a company where we now have to tell our employees, or as an adaptability, flexibility, now we have to shift kind of the way we've been working towards something to do something different. That unique skill will be learned, but all the other stuff behind it, all those other skills that enable you to navigate that and see, well, wait a minute, this could build on what I already know, and I kind of have the skills for this. Or no, this is something I want to learn that's new, and I know for myself that I will have what it takes to stick to this because it's part of my overall plan. Or you may say, I have no interest in learning that. It's something I know myself. I'm not, so I need to figure out how to make myself, my skills and my abilities and my competency and who I am, how to make that important, either in this existing role, or, it's time to look for something new. And that's not a bad thing either. So if you think about what your learning mission is, are you aiming for academic excellence? Is that something that's important to you? What does that mean? What does academic excellence mean? If it is just, I want to get all A's on everything, I'm not going to go down on that. I could get on my soapbox and I won't, but I would suggest that you think about what really getting all A's means. Academic excellence means giving it your best, learning as much as you can, right? Engaging with the material as much as you can. But again, you're entitled to define what academic excellence, or if it's even part of your mission. It might not be. Commitment to wholeness. I would, this with some people with their faith might be really important. With reasoning. So again, thinking about addressing some of the challenges we see today with too much knowledge, what that means, a commitment to really understanding who we are and where we fit in the world and how we fit with others, serving our communities, serving mankind. Are we spending enough time in reflection and contemplation, really connecting those dots? Like I said, what does it mean to be whole? And I also look at wholeness as mindfulness, as self-help, as ensuring that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself so that learning becomes a chore. What does that mean, right? And this is just examples of what the learning mission could look like. And then transformative learning, ultimately all of that. If you really are good at go back and reflect, go back and answer those questions, go back and look at your vision. And if you're aligned with all of these, you are growing and learning as a whole person and those skills are starting to make sense, and they, you know, that laddering, that connection, and that's what will help you continue to be successful in that educational journey. Next, please. So this is that document that I had Allison share. It is in, well, this is in support of that. But I teach strategy, so I'm always going to give a strategic document in order for anything I do. And this is really about the alignment of educational choices with goals. Alignment's really important. As I said, we tend to put either too much or too little faith in alignment. Finding that right sweet spot is what's important. But it is also something that might come with adjustment over time. So if you look at that document, you really want to sit down, and again, this is that mission and these are that goals, right? You want to ensure that you're making informed decisions that resonate with your vision and mission, right? So ensuring every course, workshop, extracurricular activity, volunteer, whatever you do, brings you closer to your envisioned future. And again, I'm not saying your envisioned job, your envisioned future, who you are as a person. Because this is really what the guidepost is, and what brings us to aspirations, and I'm sorry, what takes our aspirations into actionable plans, and then of course tangible outcomes. And you will see in that document, you know, you are free to do whatever you'd like, but it really aligns you through your vision statement, which I mentioned earlier. We're going to talk about barriers and the like coming up. Okay, next slide, please. So again, here's another example in practice, if we will. Consider someone passionate, again, but about environmental conservation. They might choose a program in sustainable development because it aligns with their vision of contributing to the environment, but also because it gives them knowledge and skills to make a tangible impact. So they may be coming at it from again, a person who may have a social sciences background, or who may have a humanities background, right? And their knowledge, learning what they can learn, will be applied in a very different way than someone who is aiming to innovate in the tech industry, who's looking at focus on computer science courses or boot camps or tech incubators that align with their goals of technological innovation and entrepreneurship. But the fact is, what I would like to say is that these two individuals could ultimately at some point, right, use their skills. And that's why I have sort of like a green light bulb to make an environmental impact through a technological innovation. You just don't know, right? So you aim for that passion, but recognize all of the skills that you're learning can ultimately lead you into a direction you never even intended to go in. Next slide, please. Okay, here's one more poll. So this is the question: how do you currently align your goals, your educational choices, with your long-term goals, vision, and mission? About 15 more seconds. Okay. We can, share the results, please. So again, it's a good mix. and it's not a surprising mix. The way we do these things come from a variety of choices. They come at, I would imagine, there's probably some difference in life experience in these choices and educational attainment and experience in these choices. They're not wrong, but there's not one that's right or wrong. But again, it's that question of reflectiveness, because you might actually see that, you have actually chose courses or learning opportunities for that align with different parts of your vision that you don't even realize. So that's really the importance of that reflectiveness, and then setting the strategic plan and then reviewing that plan and going back and looking at it. Because if you're drawn to a course, you should, or a workshop, or some type of educational thing, you should never sort of not do it because it doesn't strategically fit. Think about how it may strategically fit into that plan. Okay, thank you. Next. And then in the there's a follow-up question in the chat. Please share with us one area you're passionate about and how an educational could an educational program help you advance in that area. Feel free to write it in the chat. I'm assuming you're all thinking deeply in writing and you're not shy. Social justice, excellent. All right, one for me. Excellent. Entrepreneurial joy, excellent. Training and development, outstanding. Great. Again, just think of these things as, it's lovely to share. And it's also sometimes really freeing to actually put it out there, right? Leadership and communication, outstanding. Okay. Well, please keep sharing. We'll just want to make sure I get everything in before the end of the presentation. Allison, you can go to the next slide, please. So one of the big things that I think we're all thinking about, particularly as we, if we are non-traditional students, as maybe older, what are those barriers? And barriers can seem really overwhelming. And they're, they come from a variety of contexts. I pulled up some of the main barriers that I know for a fact. One, I've been a non-traditional student my entire life. So as an adult, I've had these, and also just from working with students. So of course, time management. Typically adult learners are balancing all kinds of things, including jobs, families, personal commitment. So it's often hard to find time to study. But again, like I said, an example previously was when the individual I spoke about would sit down every night after dinner and study with his kid. Financial constraints, of course, things like tuition, books, materials, they can certainly be prohibitive. Particularly if you have other expenses. Technological challenges, this is a big one. There's much more, the opportunities that democratize, right? I'm not using that term, are primarily due in many cases because of technological innovation, which can often feel overwhelming or uncomfortable. So it's like the thing that could help you is often part of the thing that is concerning, because it's like, not only do I have to learn new content, but now I have to figure out how to use this thing. So there's that. There's sometimes just a lack of access to it, or just nowhere to go. Because again, if you're in your home and you have one computer and everyone needs to use it, so that can be part of the challenge. And then confidence and academic preparedness. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the expression, the imposter syndrome, but it's like, I've been doing really well in work. I've been doing things okay, but now I'm going to go and I'm going to mess up with the technology, and I'm going to not really understand, or I'm not going to remember from high school, and everyone's going to find out I'm just a big fake. It's a very, 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 very common phenomenon for adult students. And it's why you really want to be mindful that there are opportunities for support, and you really want to reach out for them, not just financially, but for time management, for technological challenges, and for confidence and academic preparedness. So one thing you want to make sure when you're in this mission and vision, whatever you do, right? Anything from learning how to knit to taking a boot camp, be sure that you have that support, right? And that the institution that you're going to offers more than, again, just the financial support. They're there for you to help you with the other things. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So here's an example where I'm sure some of you have already, but you can think about it yourself. But identifying your own barriers. What are they? Time management, financial, lack of support or resources. There's nothing worse than when those around you are not supporting you, work isn't supporting you. What are those issues, right? Because you can't define, you have to be able to define the issues before both yourself and anyone else can help you with solutions, right? Sometimes putting them on paper is tough, but it's the way that we really can work things through. Reflect on real world examples. Look at people like yourself, model people like yourself who have gone through similar challenges. And both reflecting and reaching out to them and asking them for advice is often a way to do it. But look for people who've done it, right? It can be done, right? We all sometimes think we have the worst problems, and we do to ourselves. But the fact is that there's usually a solution. And again, with that comes, when you know what the issues are, when you've seen some of the solutions others have taken, then brainstorm strategies to support yourself. And this often, we cannot say this enough, especially here at CCPE, we want you to ask us, right? We want you to come to us and ask us for that help. Not how much is, we put the financials on the website and share all this stuff, and that's fine. But we want you to not feel uncomfortable to come to one of us and say, here are some of the strategies. What are the suggestions you have? Either while you're thinking about coming into our programs, or you're in our programs, right? Please. That's why we're here. Next, please. What are your barriers? Again, you want to develop that personal toolkit, which is what I showed you before. What are those strategies that will help you get past anything from how you'll pay to how you'll figure out, how to use the computer at home and share it with your kids. And then again, share and reflect. When we share things, we make them real. When we reflect on things, we identify, where maybe some of our biases is, or some things that weren't as horrible as we thought, or some things that maybe we thought were a little easier that turned out to be a little harder, and what that is. So challenges are a natural part of the growth process, but you have to overcome them. That's the only way to get closer to your goals and really sort of fulfilling all of what you want to do. Next, please. So again, each journey is unique. And that's one of the things that we build on here at CCPE, me, myself. Everyone is unique with your own personal fingerprints. Don't let people tell you otherwise. We are a combination of our life's experiences, what we've learned, our failures, our successes, and therefore that gives each of us absolute potential. So it's really about deciding what's right for you and then taking the steps to get there. Next slide, please. So here again, as I've noted before, we are committed to your transformation. We want you to be successful. And honestly, we want you to be successful. We obviously want you to come and study with us, but all ships rise on the same tide. So maybe you come talk to us about something and then decide that we don't have the right program for you now, but think to come back in the future when we do. And so we really would suggest, if you haven't already, you take a look at our programs. They are constantly growing. We also love input from individuals. Is there something you don't see there that you'd like? And also, just if you just want to reach out for a conversation, please do. Next. So as I said, invitation to connect and grow. I love education. It is my life goal. So your mission is my mission. And please just engage with us as you can. And I wanted to leave a couple of minutes for questions. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. So if there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or follow up with us. Talk about passion. As you can tell, I am very passionate about this subject, so I would love to help you in any way I can, as would Allison, as would our entire team. So thank you so much for attending. Please, if you haven't, follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram and check in with us. And we wish you the absolute best. Allison?
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I did want to let everyone know, I've heard a couple people in the chat asking. All of these webinars have been recorded and they're on our YouTube channel. I will be sending out the recording of this one to all who registered. But if you have any particular questions, please feel free to reach out to us at ccpe@suffolk.edu. And thank you to Dee and Media Services. This was a really great presentation. You can see in the comments, everyone really loved the content, which is just great. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.